Chapter 11, The Classical Symphony. This is our first chapter going into the classical period, which many people like to think is any music that is composed sometime before the 1900s. However, the classical period really is only between 1750 and 1800. Now, a lot of music was written during this period of time, but what sets it apart from other genres of music or other periods of time, such as the Baroque period before the classical or the Romantic period after, is the nature of the music and the clear, um, definite stops in between sections of music, which we will be going into in this chapter. Now, there is not a lot similar between the Baroque and the classical styles. In the Baroque style of instrumental music, we had a lot of polyphony and a lot of counterpoint, and the music would flow from one section to another without any stops. The classical style is almost completely the opposite. It's more of a homophonic texture with contrasting melodies, and there are clear divisions between sections of music. The only similarity is that we still have a major and minor tonality that has not really left the style of music. In the classical period, we'll be talking a lot about form, particularly sonata form. Now, we had the term sonata earlier in the Baroque period, and it basically meant any multi-movement work. In the classical era, the sonata has more of a strict definition, and it's a multi-movement work in 3 or 4 movements. So we will talk about movement structure in sonatas for the next couple of slides. If there are 3 movements in a sonata, in a piece of music, you'll expect the tempos of those movements to be first fast, the second movement slow, and the third movement will be fast. The first movement is always in what we call sonata form, a form that we will discuss later in this chapter. The second movement could be in sonata form, it could be in a theme and variations form, or some other form of music. And the third movement is often in rondo form, but it could also be in sonata form, or again, another form of music. The second and third movement of a sonata is not always as strictly defined, but the first movement is always in sonata form, and it is a form that's very important that we will be looking at later. Now, if the sonata is 4 movements long, then the first movement is still fast and in sonata form. The second movement is still slower and could have a variety of forms. But the third movement now is at a medium or a moderate tempo and will always be in the minuet and trio form, a form that we will discuss in a few slides. And it also says scherzo and trio form. Now, this form is very similar to the minuet and trio. It's only a little bit faster. And then finally, the fourth movement will be a faster tempo and can take a variety of forms. So the sonata form is the first form in our course where we really have a lot of intricacies, a lot of information about how this form is broken down. And there are 3 main sections to sonata form. The first is the exposition. In the beginning of the piece, 2 themes are presented to the listener. First, you hear the first theme, then you will hear a section called a bridge, a connecting piece of music that links the 2 themes together. After the bridge is played, then the second theme is played. This second theme is often in a different key than the first theme. Not something that we have to go into very much as music appreciation students, but musically speaking, it was very significant. After both themes have been established, The exposition is often repeated, and we start again with the first theme, the bridge, and then the second theme. After the exposition is the section called the development. Now, the development is very hard to describe, but in this part of the piece, the composer will take small parts of the themes that have been heard and manipulate them, have them play in different sections of the orchestra or modulate the key. This particular section can take on a variety of forms, and it's hard for the listener to really pin down exactly what is going on in the development section in various pieces. But what you can be sure of hearing is something called a motive, or a small piece of a melody, being played multiple times and changing frequently within the piece of music. After the development is a section called the recapitulation. Now, this section is very similar to the exposition. We once again hear the themes that were presented in the exposition. We will hear the first theme, a bridge, and then the second theme. Another difference in the recapitulation is that the second theme is presented in the original key, the first key that the piece is in, rather than a different key as it was presented in the exposition. After both themes have been presented for a final time, usually a coda is added. Now, a coda is a closing part of the music, a bit of music made to help wrap up the piece and give it a solid conclusion. Now, the sonata form is a very prominent form of music in the classical period, but there were other forms that were used in sonatas and other genres of music. One of those genres is one of those forms is the theme and variations form. A very simple form where a theme is presented to the listener, and then that theme is repeated, stated in a variety of ways as the composer changes the versions of the theme that is presented. Once several variations of the theme have been played, a coda, or an ending section of the music, is presented to complete the piece. Another form is the minuet and trio form. And this is the form that is always used in the third movement of a four-movement sonata. Now, the minuet and trio is a triple meter form. So you'll hear that 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3 as you listen to it. It is also always in ternary form, meaning you hear the first section, the minuet, the second section, the trio, and then the minuet again, the first section again. And those three sections make it a ternary form piece. Moving on from form, we will talk about the classical orchestra. Now, in the classical period, the orchestra became a standard ensemble of music, a standard body of instruments that consisted of 24 violins, 4 violas, 4 cellos, 4 basses, 4 horns, flutes, oboes, clarinets, bassoons, trumpets, and timpani. This was what was the standard makeup of an orchestra in the classical period. A man named Joseph Stamitz was the one who standardized the orchestra, and he is known for being the first to standardize it in the classical period. Joseph Haydn is known as the father of the string quartet and the symphony due to his compositions. The most prominent composer in the classical period, and probably one of the most famous composers in our society, is Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart. Um, he was alive from 1756 to 1791, which is pretty much the years that the classical period spanned. In that time, he composed a great number of works, and basically represented the classical period with his music. You will definitely read more about him in your textbook. This is a list of some of Mozart's compositions. Again, a very prolific composer who wrote many pieces of music during his short life. The listening example for this chapter is Mozart's Symphony No. 40 in G minor. Various assignments will guide you through how to listen for sonata form and help you understand what to hear in a classical piece of music. That concludes the lecture for chapter 11.